The helicopter rotors screamed against hurricane-force winds as Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez brought the medevac bird down through zero visibility onto a glacier that wasn't supposed to exist on any flight map, while seasoned combat pilots back at base shook their heads and muttered that no one could have made that landing alive, let alone the quiet medic they'd barely noticed for the past 8 months. The emergency klaxon shattered the pre-dawn silence at Forward Operating Base Kodiak, perched on the edge of the Alaskan wilderness like a concrete finger pointing into the void. Elena jerked awake in her narrow bunk, instantly alert despite having worked a double shift in the medical bay just 4 hours earlier. The sound that followed made her blood freeze, not the standard alarm for incoming wounded, but the triple burst pattern that meant catastrophic emergency. She rolled out of bed, her boots hitting the cold floor with practiced efficiency. Around her, the medical barracks erupted into controlled chaos as nurses and corpsmen responded to the call. But Elena noticed something that made her stomach clench with dread. Through the small window, she could see the maintenance hangar where the base's 2 medevac helicopters should have been sitting ready for immediate deployment. Only one bird sat in the hangar. The other was scattered across the tarmac in pieces, its twisted rotor blades catching the harsh floodlights like broken teeth. "All medical personnel, report to the command center immediately," came the voice over the facility-wide speakers. Colonel Martinez sounded like a man trying to maintain control over a situation spiraling rapidly beyond his command. "Priority Alpha emergency briefing in progress." Elena pulled on her uniform, noting the weight of her medical kit as she slung it over her shoulder. In the 8 months since arriving at FOB Kodiak, she'd treated everything from frostbite to gunshot wounds, but the base's remote location meant that serious casualties usually required immediate evacuation to Anchorage. With only 1 helicopter operational, that capability had just been cut in half. The command center buzzed with tension as Elena entered alongside the other medical staff. Colonel Martinez stood before a large tactical display, showing the surrounding wilderness, his weathered face grim under the harsh fluorescent lights. Beside him, Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, the base's senior pilot, looked like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. "People, we have a situation," Martinez began without preamble. "At 0347 hours, we received a distress call from Research Station Echo, located approximately 180 kilometers northeast of our position." He gestured to a red dot on the display, isolated in what appeared to be an endless expanse of white. The station was conducting geological surveys when an avalanche struck their facility. Elena studied the location, automatically calculating flight times and medical requirements. Research Station Echo was civilian, staffed by scientists and graduate students who'd volunteered for one of the most isolated assignments on Earth. The kind of people who came to Alaska to study climate change and glacial movement, not expecting to face life-or-death emergencies. "We have confirmed casualties," Martinez continued. "At least 4 injured, 2 critical. The station's emergency medical supplies are basic at best, and their facility has been partially buried by the avalanche. They need immediate evacuation or they're going to die." Dr. Sarah Chen, the base's senior medical officer, stepped forward. "What's our extraction timeline, Colonel?" Martinez exchanged a grim look with Chief Thompson. "That's where we have a problem. The weather front moving in from the northwest is bringing winds gusting to 85 knots and whiteout conditions. The storm is expected to last at least 72 hours. Elena felt the implications hit her like a physical blow. 72 hours was a death sentence for critical casualties in sub-zero temperatures with minimal medical support. She'd seen what happened to trauma victims when evacuation was delayed. Internal bleeding, hypothermia, shock, and infection could kill someone in a matter of hours, even with proper medical care. Chief Thompson cleared his throat. "Sir, I need to be direct about our capabilities. The remaining helicopter is our backup bird. Older model, fewer safety systems, limited all-weather capability. Under normal conditions, I could make the flight to Echo Station, but these aren't normal conditions." "What are you saying, Chief?" Dr. Chen asked. "I'm saying that attempting a flight in these conditions, with that aircraft, to a landing zone that's been altered by an avalanche is likely to result in losing our last helicopter and potentially our medical team. Thompson's voice carried the weight of a man who'd made countless life-or-death decisions over 20 years of military aviation. The risk assessment is off the charts. Silence settled over the command center like a heavy blanket. Elena could see the conflict playing out on Martinez's face. The duty to attempt a rescue versus the responsibility not to throw away more lives in a futile gesture. Military leadership meant making impossible decisions, but that didn't make them any easier. "Sir," Dr. Chen said carefully, "what about requesting assistance from Elmendorf or Eielson? They have aircraft better equipped for severe weather operations." Martinez shook his head. "Already tried. The storm system covers everything between here and Anchorage. No one's flying until it passes, and by then." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Elena found herself studying the tactical display more intently, her mind automatically processing flight routes, fuel requirements, and weather patterns. The path to Research Station Echo crossed some of the most treacherous terrain in Alaska. Mountain peaks that could generate their own weather systems, glacial valleys where downdrafts could slam an aircraft into the ground without warning, and frozen wasteland where an emergency landing meant certain death. But she also noticed something that the others might have missed. The avalanche had occurred in a valley system she recognized from geological surveys she'd studied during her civilian education. The terrain features were distinctive. A series of interconnected valleys that could provide natural wind breaks if approached from the correct angle. "What about alternative landing zones?" Elena asked, speaking for the first time since entering the briefing. Chief Thompson looked at her with the expression reserved for well-meaning but naive suggestions. "Vasquez, right? You're medical." "I appreciate the input, but landing zone selection in this kind of terrain requires extensive aviation experience. We can't just set down anywhere we feel like it." The dismissal was polite but firm, the kind of response Elena had grown accustomed to during her time at FOB Kodiak. To the flight crews, she was just another medic, competent at her job, certainly, but not someone whose opinion carried weight in operational planning. They saw her as someone who fixed people after the real soldiers brought them back from dangerous missions. If only they knew. Elena had spent 4 years as a helicopter pilot before cross-training into medical, flying everything from transport missions to combat air ambulance operations in 3 different theaters. She'd accumulated over 1,200 flight hours in conditions that would have challenged pilots with twice her experience, including night operations in mountainous terrain and weather that grounded less experienced aviators. But that was her previous life, before the incident that had led to her medical cross-training. Before she decided that saving lives was more important than the glory of being behind the controls. Her pilot qualifications were still current, technically, but buried in personnel files that no one at FOB Kodiak had reason to examine. "Chief Thompson," she said, keeping her voice respectful but persistent, "I've studied the geological surveys of that region. The avalanche occurred in the Kluane Valley system. There are natural landing approaches that could provide wind protection if the weather patterns are analyzed correctly." Thompson's expression shifted from polite dismissal to mild irritation. "Vasquez, I appreciate your interest, but reading geological surveys isn't the same as understanding aviation meteorology and mountain flying techniques. This isn't a theoretical exercise. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel." Elena felt the familiar frustration that came with being underestimated, but she also recognized the chief's position. From his perspective, she was a medic, offering opinions on subjects outside her expertise. He had no way of knowing that she'd flown similar missions in similar conditions, with aircraft that had less capability than what they currently had available. Colonel Martinez was studying weather reports on another display, his expression growing more grim by the minute. The storms intensifying faster than predicted. We're looking at sustained winds over 70 knots within the next 6 hours. After that, nothing flies until it passes. Dr. Chen approached the tactical display. "Colonel, what are the medical realities if we can't attempt extraction?" Martinez looked to Elena, recognizing her as the most experienced trauma medic on base. "Vasquez, give me your assessment. 4 casualties, 2 critical minimal medical supplies, sub-zero temperatures, no heated shelter." Elena studied the information displayed on the screen, drawing on 8 months of treating cold weather injuries and trauma cases. "Sir, critical casualties in those conditions have maybe 12 to 18 hours before hypothermia and shock become irreversible. Even if the injured receive basic first aid, without proper medical intervention and climate-controlled environment, survival probability drops below 20% after the first day." The stark medical reality settled over the room like a death sentence. Research Station Echo's casualties were going to die, and there was nothing they could do about it except listen to increasingly desperate radio calls until the transmissions stopped. Elena found herself staring at the weather data, her pilot's mind automatically processing wind patterns, pressure systems, and visibility reports. The storm was massive, but it wasn't uniform. There were gaps in the system, brief windows where a skilled pilot might be able to penetrate the worst weather and reach the research station. But those windows required precise timing, intimate knowledge of mountain weather patterns, and flying skills that went far beyond basic helicopter operation. The kind of skills that took years to develop and couldn't be learned from textbooks or simulations. "Sir," Elena said, her voice cutting through the subdued conversations around the command center, "I need to speak with you privately." Colonel Martinez looked at her with surprise. In 8 months, Elena had never requested a private meeting, never pushed beyond her assigned duties, never indicated that she had anything to contribute beyond her medical expertise. "Vasquez, we're in the middle of a crisis briefing. Whatever you need to discuss can wait." "No, sir, it can't." Elena's voice carried a conviction that made several people in the room look at her with new attention. "Because in about 4 hours, those people at Research Station Echo are going to start dying, and I'm the only person on this base who can get them out." The command center fell completely silent. Chief Thompson stared at Elena as if she'd claimed to be able to fly by flapping her arms. Dr. Chen looked concerned, as if Elena might be suffering from some kind of stress-induced delusion. Colonel Martinez studied Elena's face for a long moment, reading something in her expression that the others had missed. "Chief Thompson, continue monitoring weather conditions and maintain radio contact with Echo Station. Dr. Chen, prep a full trauma response team just in case. Everyone else, carry on with standard duties." As the room emptied, Martinez gestured for Elena to follow him to his private office. The space was Spartanly functional, dominated by tactical maps and communication equipment, with a single personal photo showing Martinez with his family at some long-ago military ceremony. "All right, Vasquez," Martinez said, settling behind his desk. "You've got my attention. What exactly are you saying?" Elena took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would either save 4 lives or end her military career. "Sir, I'm saying that I can fly that helicopter to Research Station Echo, extract the casualties, and bring them back alive." Martinez leaned back in his chair, studying Elena with the expression of a man trying to determine if he was dealing with heroic determination or complete mental breakdown. "Vasquez, you're a medic, a damn good one from what I've seen, but you're not a pilot." "Actually, sir, I am." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Martinez thought he knew about his personnel. Elena reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small leather wallet, extracting her military pilot's license and advanced helicopter certifications. Martinez examined the documents with growing amazement. The qualifications were extensive: multi-engine helicopter certification, instrument flight rating, mountain flying qualification, combat air ambulance specialization. Over 1,200 flight hours documented, including operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Somalia. "Why the hell is this not in your primary personnel file?" Martinez demanded. "Because I requested it be classified as supplementary information when I cross-trained to medical. I wanted to be evaluated based on my medical skills, not my previous aviation experience." Martinez continued studying the certifications. "These are current. You've maintained your flight status." "Yes, sir. I fly civilian helicopters on leave to keep my hours current." but I haven't flown military aircraft in 18 months. Why did you leave aviation for medical? Elena hesitated, knowing that her answer would determine Martinez's decision. I lost my crew in a crash during a medical evacuation mission in Syria. Mechanical failure, nothing I could have prevented, but 3 good people died because I couldn't keep that bird in the air. She met Martinez's eyes. I decided that if I was going to save lives, I wanted to do it with my hands instead of risking other people's lives with my flying. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. But you're willing to fly now. Sir, 4 people are going to die if someone doesn't attempt extraction. Chief Thompson is right that the mission is extremely dangerous, but he's also right that our backup helicopter isn't equipped for severe weather operations under normal protocols. Elena leaned forward. But I've flown worse aircraft in worse conditions. I know mountain flying techniques that could get through this storm system. And if you're wrong, if you crash that helicopter, we lose our only remaining aircraft and our most experienced trauma medic. If I don't try, we lose 4 civilians who came to Alaska to contribute to scientific research, not to die in an avalanche. Elena's voice carried quiet conviction. Sir, I took an oath as a medic to preserve life. Sometimes that means using every skill available, not just the ones that fit neatly into someone's job description. Martinez stood and walked to the window overlooking the flight line, where the remaining helicopter sat waiting in the harsh Alaskan dawn. Snow was already beginning to fall, the leading edge of the storm system that would soon make flight impossible. Even if I authorized this mission, Chief Thompson would have to agree to let you take his aircraft. He's not going to hand over a multi-million-dollar helicopter to someone he sees as an unqualified medic. Then don't tell him I'm just a medic, Elena replied. Tell him I'm a pilot with over 1,200 hours who specializes in medical evacuation operations. Martinez turned back to face her, and Elena could see the moment when his perception of her shifted permanently. She was no longer just the quiet medic who efficiently handled trauma cases and never caused problems. She was a resource he hadn't known he possessed, a solution to an impossible problem. If I authorize this, you understand that you're assuming full responsibility for mission success and aircraft safety. If something goes wrong, there's no backup, no second chances. I understand, sir. Martinez studied her for another long moment, then reached for his communications equipment. Chief Thompson, report to my office immediately. And bring all current weather data and aircraft specifications for our remaining bird. As they waited for Thompson's arrival, Elena felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her mind. She began mentally reviewing helicopter specifications, calculating fuel requirements and flight times, analyzing weather patterns and terrain features. For the first time in 18 months, she was thinking like a pilot instead of a medic. But this time, instead of hoping she could keep people alive until reaching medical facilities, she would be both the pilot getting them to safety and the medic keeping them alive during the flight. Chief Thompson entered the office carrying tablets loaded with technical data, his expression curious about the unusual summons. When he saw Elena still present, his curiosity shifted to confusion. Sir, if this is about alternative mission planning, I've already run every possible scenario. The weather conditions make flight operations. Chief, Martinez interrupted, I need you to look at these credentials. Thompson accepted Elena's pilot certifications, and Elena watched his expression transform from confusion to surprise to professional respect. He studied each document carefully, paying particular attention to her flight hours and specialized qualifications. Ma'am, Thompson said, his tone shifting to the formal respect accorded to fellow aviators. I apologize. I had no idea you were rated on rotary wing aircraft. No reason you should have known, Chief. I haven't advertised my aviation background. Thompson continued examining her certifications. 1,200 hours, including mountain operations and severe weather qualifications. Combat air ambulance experience. He looked up at Elena with new understanding. You think you can make this flight? I know I can, Chief. The question is whether you're willing to trust me with your aircraft. Thompson walked to Martinez's tactical display, studying the route to Research Station Echo and the current weather data. The approach to that valley system is going to require precision flying in zero visibility conditions. You'll be navigating by instruments through terrain that can kill you if you deviate from course by more than a few hundred meters. "I've done it before," Elena replied simply. "Not in this aircraft, not in this specific weather system, and not to a landing zone that's been altered by an avalanche." Thompson's voice carried the concern of a professional aviator for both aircraft and pilot safety. Elena approached the display and began pointing out terrain features. "Chief, look at the valley approach from the southwest. The avalanche occurred here, but it also created a natural windbreak along this ridgeline. If I follow this approach vector, I can use the terrain to minimize crosswind exposure." Thompson studied her suggested route with growing interest. "That's actually a sophisticated approach to mountain weather flying. Where did you learn techniques like that?" "Afghanistan. Flying medical evacuations in the Hindu Kush Mountains taught me that sometimes you have to use the terrain as an ally instead of fighting it as an enemy." For the first time since the briefing began, Thompson's expression showed something other than pessimism. "You really think this is possible?" Elena met his eyes with the confidence of someone who had navigated similar challenges before. "Chief, I've flown medical evacuations in sandstorms that grounded everything else in theater. I've extracted casualties from landing zones under active fire. I've brought helicopters home with critical system failures that should have resulted in crashes." She paused. "This is just another medical evacuation mission that happens to require some advanced flying techniques." Thompson looked to Martinez, then back at Elena. "Ma'am, if you're wrong about this, we lose our only helicopter and potentially our best medic. If I'm right, 4 people go home alive who otherwise wouldn't." Thompson was quiet for a long moment, weighing professional caution against the stark reality of the situation. Finally, he extended his hand to Elena. "Welcome back to flight operations, pilot. Let's go save some lives." As Elena shook his hand, she felt something shift inside her that had been dormant for 18 months. She was no longer just a medic who happened to have aviation experience. She was a pilot again, with a mission that would test every skill she'd ever learned, and some she was about to discover. The storm was building outside, but for the first time since the emergency began, Elena felt like they had a chance. The medical bay buzzed with subdued activity as Elena gathered her equipment, watched by curious colleagues who couldn't quite process what they just learned about their quiet coworker. Corpsman Martinez, no relation to the colonel, approached her station where she was methodically checking trauma supplies with the precision of someone who'd done this countless times before. "Vasquez, is it true what they're saying, that you're actually going to fly the rescue mission?" Martinez's voice carried the incredulity of someone trying to reconcile 8 months of routine medical interactions with the idea that Elena possessed skills none of them had suspected. Elena didn't look up from her inventory checklist. "It's true. But your medical corps, you've never even mentioned knowing how to fly. How does someone just forget to mention they're a pilot?" The question hung in the air as Elena continued her methodical preparation. She'd been dreading this conversation since leaving Colonel Martinez's office, knowing that word would spread through the small base like wildfire. FOB Kodiak housed fewer than 200 personnel, and in that kind of environment, secrets were impossible to keep once they surfaced. "Some things aren't relevant to daily duties," Elena replied, sealing a medical kit designed for field trauma care. "Until today." Nurse Patricia Wong, who'd worked alongside Elena for months treating everything from altitude sickness to combat injuries, shook her head in disbelief. "Not relevant? Elena, you've been working medical evacuations with us for 8 months. Every time we load casualties onto those helicopters, you could have been in the cockpit instead of the back treating patients." Elena finally looked up from her preparations. "And who would have provided medical care during those flights? The pilots?" "Patty, there's a reason medical aircraft carry dedicated medical personnel. Someone has to keep the patients alive between pickup and delivery." Dr. Chen entered the medical bay carrying additional trauma supplies, her expression mixing professional concern with personal curiosity. "Vasquez, I need to understand your medical status for this mission. You're trained as both pilot and flight medic, but you can't perform both roles simultaneously." It was a valid point that Elena had already considered. Military flight regulations required dedicated roles for safety reasons. Pilots focused on flying, medical personnel focused on patient care. Attempting to do both simultaneously violated every protocol designed to prevent accidents and ensure optimal patient outcomes. "Doctor, this isn't a standard medical evacuation with a full crew. This is an emergency extraction where I'm the only person available with the necessary flight qualifications." Elena gestured toward the window where snow was falling with increasing intensity. "In 90 minutes, weather conditions will make flight impossible until the storm passes." "Those casualties don't have 90 minutes. Dr. Chen nodded reluctantly. "Understood, but I want you carrying advanced life support equipment and preloaded medications for trauma management. If you're the only medical personnel on that aircraft, you need every advantage available." Elena appreciated the support, even though it highlighted another layer of complexity in her mission. She would need to stabilize and treat casualties while simultaneously navigating one of the most challenging flight environments in Alaska. The workload would require switching between roles rapidly and efficiently, with no margin for error in either capacity. Chief Thompson appeared in the medical bay doorway carrying flight charts and weather data. "Vasquez, we need to discuss mission specifics. Based on current weather progression, you have approximately 75 minutes before conditions deteriorate beyond safe flight parameters." Elena followed Thompson to a briefing table where he'd spread detailed topographical maps of the region between FOB Kodiak and Research Station Echo. The route crossed terrain that looked intimidating even on paper: mountain peaks reaching over 8,000 feet, glacial valleys that could generate unpredictable downdrafts, and weather patterns that could change from flyable to fatal within minutes. "Current conditions at Echo Station are deteriorating rapidly," Thompson began, pointing to weather data on his tablet. "Visibility is down to less than quarter mile, with winds gusting to 60 knots. The avalanche has altered the terrain around their facility, so your landing zone is going to be different from what's shown on standard charts." Elena studied the topographical information, noting elevation changes and natural terrain features that could affect aircraft performance. "What about fuel requirements? That's a long flight in challenging conditions." "That's our first major limitation. The helicopter has enough fuel for the round trip with minimal reserves. You won't have the luxury of circling to find better weather or attempting multiple landing approaches." Thompson's voice carried the weight of someone who understood how many things could go wrong when fuel margins were tight. Elena ran calculations in her mind, factoring in headwinds, altitude changes, and the additional fuel consumption that came with flying in turbulent conditions. "If I maintain optimal cruise speed and altitude, I should have approximately 15 minutes of reserve fuel. That's cutting it close, but workable. Assuming you don't encounter unexpected weather that forces altitude or route changes," Thompson added grimly. Dr. Chen, who had been reviewing medical protocols, looked up from her tablet. "Elena, what's your plan for patient care during extraction? Some of these casualties may require continuous medical attention." Elena had been considering this challenge since accepting the mission. Standard medical evacuation procedures assumed a dedicated medical crew with the luxury of focusing solely on patient care. Flying solo meant she would need to provide medical treatment while simultaneously maintaining aircraft control. "Doctor, I'll need to configure the aircraft with patients positioned where I can monitor them from the cockpit. Critical casualties get priority positioning with direct visual access. I'll use automated medical monitoring equipment where possible and rely on preloaded medications for immediate interventions." Thompson was making notes on his charts. "That means modifying the standard medical configuration. I can have maintenance install additional monitoring equipment within reach of the pilot's position, but it's going to be cramped." Elena nodded. "Chief, I've flown medical missions in aircraft with less space and equipment. The priority is getting those people off that mountain alive. Everything else is secondary." As they continued planning, Elena became aware of conversations happening around the medical bay. Other personnel were discussing the mission in tones that ranged from admiration to skepticism, and she caught fragments of comments that revealed how dramatically her colleagues' perceptions were shifting. Never would have guessed she was a pilot. Heard she has more flight hours than some of the pilots at Elmendorf. Still can't believe Quiet Vasquez is going to attempt this. Sergeant Rodriguez from the communications section approached their planning table. Ma'am, I've been monitoring radio traffic from Echo Station. The situation is deteriorating faster than initially reported. Elena felt her stomach tighten. What kind of deterioration? One of the critical casualties has developed signs of internal bleeding. Their facility medic, a graduate student with basic first aid training, is reporting decreased consciousness and what sounds like shock symptoms. Rodriguez consulted his notes. They're requesting immediate medical guidance, but there's only so much we can do over radio. Dr. Chen absorbed this information with the grim expression of someone who understood the medical implications. Internal bleeding in a trauma patient, especially in hypothermic conditions, can progress rapidly. That casualty may not survive the flight time, even if extraction begins immediately. Elena studied the weather data with renewed urgency. Chief, how much time do I have before conditions become completely impossible? Thompson checked his latest meteorological reports. Based on current progression, you need to be airborne within 60 minutes. After that, wind speeds and visibility will ground everything until the storm passes. Elena felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her mind, the same mental state she'd experienced before challenging flights in combat zones. Time became more precious, details became sharper, and the weight of responsibility transformed from burden to motivation. I need to speak with the Echo Station medic directly, Elena decided. If I'm going to treat casualties during extraction, I need better information about their current medical status. Rodriguez led her to the communications center, where radio equipment maintained contact with the isolated research station. The voice that came through the static-filled channel belonged to someone young and clearly overwhelmed by circumstances far beyond their training. Echo Station, this is Fob Kodiak Medical. I need detailed information about your casualty's current status. Kodiak Medical, this is Jenny Morrison at Echo Station. The voice carried barely controlled panic. The patient with internal bleeding is getting worse. His blood pressure is dropping and he's becoming less responsive. I don't know what else to do. Elena recognized the helplessness in Morrison's voice, the frustration of someone with limited medical training watching people suffer beyond their ability to help. Jenny, I'm Staff Sergeant Vasquez, and I'm going to walk you through some immediate interventions while we prepare for extraction. Over the next 20 minutes, Elena provided detailed medical guidance, instructing Morrison on techniques for monitoring vital signs, positioning patients to optimize circulation, and using available materials to provide better insulation against hypothermia. The radio conversations painted a clearer picture of the medical challenges awaiting her at Echo Station. 4 casualties total, 2 with significant trauma from falling debris, 1 with suspected spinal injuries, and 1 with internal bleeding that was progressing toward life-threatening status. The research station's emergency medical supplies consisted of basic first aid materials never intended for serious trauma care. Dr. Chen monitored Elena's radio instructions with professional approval. Your field medicine guidance is exactly what I would have recommended. You're keeping them stable until extraction is possible. Elena appreciated the validation, though she knew that radio guidance could only accomplish so much. The real medical challenges would begin when she reached Echo Station and had to provide hands-on trauma care while simultaneously preparing for one of the most difficult flights of her career. Chief Thompson returned with final weather updates and aircraft specifications. Vasquez, I've had maintenance install additional medical monitoring equipment and configure the cabin for maximum patient capacity. The aircraft is fueled and ready for immediate departure. Elena reviewed the modified aircraft configuration on Thompson's tablet. The changes were practical, but highlighted how much she would be attempting simultaneously. Pilot duties that required constant attention to instruments and weather conditions, medical duties that demanded focused patient care, and navigation challenges that could prove fatal if handled incorrectly. Corpsman Martinez approached with additional medical supplies. Elena, I still can't believe you're actually going to do this. I mean, we've worked together for months, and you never gave any indication that you had this kind of aviation experience. Elena accepted the medical supplies and began integrating them into her mission kit. Martinez, how many times have you mentioned your civilian job experience during duty hours? Your background in emergency medical services? Your volunteer firefighting experience? Your search and rescue training? Martinez looked confused. Those aren't relevant to military medical duties. Exactly. Neither was my aviation background until today. Elena secured the last of her equipment. We all have skills and experiences that don't show up in daily duties. Sometimes circumstances require using capabilities we don't normally access. Dr. Chen was conducting a final review of Elena's medical preparations. Your trauma response kit is comprehensive, but I'm concerned about the time constraints you'll face. Providing adequate medical care while flying in severe weather conditions is going to require exceptional multitasking abilities. Elena had been considering the same concern. Military aviation doctrine emphasized single-focus attention for safety reasons, but emergency conditions sometimes demanded breaking standard protocols. Her success would depend on skills she'd developed through years of experience, the ability to maintain aircraft control while managing critical medical situations. Doctor, I've flown medical missions where patient care couldn't wait for ideal conditions. Sometimes you have to treat casualties while avoiding surface-to-air missiles, or provide advanced life support while navigating through sandstorms. This is challenging, but it's not unprecedented. Thompson was making final checks on weather conditions and aircraft status. Vasquez, you have 45 minutes until weather conditions deteriorate beyond safe flight parameters. After that, no one flies until the storm passes. Elena felt the weight of that timeline settling over everything. 45 minutes to complete pre-flight checks, transit to Echo Station, locate and treat casualties, load them safely for transport, and begin the return flight. Any delays, any complications, any unexpected challenges could mean the difference between successful rescue and disaster. She thought about the people waiting at Echo Station, scientists and graduate students who'd come to Alaska to study climate change and glacial geology, not expecting to face life-threatening emergencies. Jenny Morrison, the overwhelmed medic trying to keep people alive with inadequate supplies and minimal training. The casualties themselves, fighting hypothermia and trauma, while depending on rescue that might not arrive in time. Elena had joined the medical corps to save lives, but she'd never imagined that saving lives would require returning to the cockpit she'd abandoned after losing her crew in Syria. The irony wasn't lost on her. The skills she'd tried to leave behind were now the only thing standing between 4 people and death in the Alaskan wilderness. Chief Thompson was completing final aircraft inspections when Elena joined him on the flight line. Snow was falling steadily now, and wind was beginning to affect the helicopter's tie-down lines. The storm was arriving ahead of schedule. Ma'am, the aircraft is ready for immediate departure. All systems checked, fuel topped off, medical configuration complete. Thompson's voice carried professional respect, but Elena could see concern in his expression. Are you certain about this mission? Elena looked at the helicopter that would either save 4 lives or become her tomb in the Alaskan wilderness. Chief, I'm certain that if I don't attempt this mission, 4 people die. Everything else is just risk management. Thompson nodded slowly. Then let's get you airborne, before this weather gets any worse. As Elena began her pre-flight inspection, she was aware of personnel gathering around the flight line despite the worsening weather. Word had spread throughout FOB Kodiak that the quiet medic they'd worked alongside for 8 months was about to attempt one of the most challenging rescue missions in the base's operational history. For the first time since arriving at FOB Kodiak, Elena wasn't just another medical corps member performing routine duties. She was the pilot who might be able to do what no one else would attempt. The transformation was complete in everyone's mind except her own. To Elena, she was still just someone trying to save lives, using whatever skills the situation required. Elena's hands moved through the pre-flight inspection with muscle memory that surprised her after 18 months away from the cockpit. Each component check revealed systems that were functional but dated. This helicopter had served faithfully for years, but it lacked the advanced weather radar and navigation systems that newer aircraft carried as standard equipment. She would be flying into one of Alaska's most dangerous storm systems, with instruments that required constant pilot interpretation rather than automated assistance. The radio crackled as she completed her exterior inspection. Echo Station, this is FOB Kodiak. requesting updated casualty status for medical planning. Jenny Morrison's voice came through with barely controlled desperation. "Kodiak, the bleeding patient is much worse. David's unconscious now, and his skin is getting gray. I can barely find a pulse." A pause filled with static and wind noise. "There's something else. We just found Dr. Reeves under more debris. She's alive, but trapped. That makes 5 casualties total." Elena felt her chest tighten. 5 casualties instead of 4 changed everything. Aircraft weight distribution, medical priority decisions, and the time required for extraction from a compromised landing zone. But the name Morrison had mentioned sent a different kind of shock through her system. Echo Station confirmed the name of the newly discovered casualty. Dr. Sarah Reeves, she's our team leader, geologist from University of Colorado. Elena, she keeps asking for someone named Elena Vasquez. Says she knows you? The clipboard in Elena's hands trembled slightly before her training reasserted control. Sarah Reeves. Her college roommate, the geology major who'd convinced Elena to take a summer job with a geological survey crew during their sophomore year. The person who'd introduced Elena to mountain flying when they'd spent 3 weeks mapping glacier formations in Montana, with Elena piloting a rented helicopter, while Sarah directed scientific observations from the air. Sarah, who'd sent Christmas cards for 8 years, updating Elena on her research career and always closing with, "We need to go flying together again soon." Sarah, who'd been the maid of honor at Elena's wedding, and had held Elena's hand during the divorce proceedings 2 years later. Sarah, who'd been the first person Elena had called after the crash in Syria, needing to talk to someone who understood both her aviation passion and her guilt about losing her crew. Echo Station, confirmed. Dr. Reeves is known to me personally. Elena's voice remained professionally steady despite the emotional storm building inside her. What's her current medical status? She's conscious but reports severe pain in her legs. The debris is heavy. Probably took 3 people to move it when the facility was built. Without proper equipment, we can't get her free. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, processing the implications. Sarah was trapped under debris that required mechanical assistance to move, while David was bleeding to death from internal injuries. The weather window was shrinking by the minute, and now she faced the impossible choice of prioritizing rescue efforts when every casualty needed immediate attention. Chief Thompson approached carrying additional weather data, his expression growing more concerned as he studied the latest reports. "Vasquez, the storm system is accelerating. You now have 35 minutes maximum before flight becomes impossible. After that, winds will exceed aircraft limitations." Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elena accepted the weather update while her mind raced through logistics. 35 minutes to reach Echo Station, assess 5 casualties, potentially move debris to free Sarah, provide medical stabilization for critical patients, load everyone safely for transport, and begin the return flight before weather conditions became fatal. "Chief, what kind of equipment does Echo Station have for moving heavy debris?" Thompson consulted facility reports on his tablet. "Basic research station supplies, some hand tools, but nothing designed for heavy lifting or debris removal. They're scientists, not construction workers." Elena thought about Sarah, trapped and in pain, while her colleagues struggled with inadequate tools to free her. The image stirred memories of their college years. Sarah's infectious enthusiasm for geological research, her determination to understand how mountain systems evolved, her absolute trust in Elena's flying abilities during their mapping expeditions. "Ma'am," Thompson continued, "you need to understand that attempting to move debris adds significant time to your ground operations. Every minute you spend on the ground is a minute of fuel consumption and weather deterioration." Elena understood the tactical reality, but she also understood something Thompson couldn't. Sarah Reeves wasn't just another casualty requiring extraction. She was the person who'd helped Elena discover her love of mountain flying, who'd encouraged Elena to pursue military aviation, who'd been there during Elena's darkest moments after the Syria crash. The radio crackled again with Morrison's increasingly frantic voice. "Kodiak, David's pulse is getting weaker. I don't think he's going to make it much longer. And Dr. Reeves is starting to show signs of shock. Her skin is getting cold and clammy. Dr. Chen approached with additional medical supplies, her expression reflecting the growing complexity of the mission. Elena, with 5 casualties, including 1 requiring debris removal, you're looking at extended ground time and deteriorating weather conditions. This is becoming exponentially more dangerous. Elena appreciated Dr. Chen's concern, but she also recognized that medical protocols were designed for situations where multiple options existed. When the only choice was between attempting an impossible mission or watching people die, standard risk assessments became irrelevant. Doctor, how long can someone with internal bleeding survive in hypothermic conditions without surgical intervention? Dr. Chen consulted her medical references. Based on the symptoms Morrison described, probably 30 to 40 minutes maximum. After that, blood loss and hypothermia will cause irreversible organ shutdown. Elena processed this timeline against her flight requirements. 30 minutes to reach Echo Station, assuming optimal weather conditions. 10 to 15 minutes for medical assessment and patient stabilization. Unknown time required to free Sarah from debris. 25 minutes return flight time. The mathematics were brutal. Success required everything to proceed perfectly, with no margin for complications or unexpected challenges. Corpsman Martinez was monitoring radio communications when another transmission came through from Echo Station. Kodiak, this is Jenny. Dr. Reeves wants to speak with Elena personally. She says it's important. Elena accepted the radio handset, steeling herself for a conversation that would make an already personal mission even more emotionally challenging. Sarah, this is Elena. I'm coming to get you out of there. Sarah's voice came through the static, weaker than Elena remembered, but carrying the same determination that had characterized their friendship for over a decade. Elena, thank God you're there. Listen, you need to prioritize David and the other trauma cases. Don't waste time trying to move this debris for me. The suggestion hit Elena like a physical blow. Sarah was essentially asking Elena to leave her trapped while focusing on other casualties, accepting that she might not be rescued if weather conditions deteriorated further. Sarah, we're getting everyone out. No one gets left behind. Elena, you know mountain flying better than anyone. You understand the weather windows and fuel limitations. Sarah's voice carried the analytical clarity that had made her an excellent scientist. I can survive being trapped longer than David can survive internal bleeding. Use your time efficiently. Elena felt tears threatening for the first time since accepting the mission. Sarah was making the same kind of tactical decisions that Elena had learned to make as a military pilot, prioritizing mission success over personal survival, accepting necessary sacrifices to achieve the greater good. But this wasn't just tactical decision-making. This was Sarah, who'd helped Elena through flight school anxiety, who'd celebrated when Elena earned her wings, who'd grieved with Elena after the Syria crash. The person who'd never given up on their friendship despite Elena's tendency to withdraw when dealing with professional stress. Sarah, I'm not having this conversation. I'm extracting all casualties, including the stubborn geologist who thinks she can make my tactical decisions for me. Sarah's laugh came through the radio despite her pain. Still the most determined pilot I know. Elena, be careful up there. This storm system is unlike anything I've seen in 10 years of Arctic research. Elena understood Sarah's warning. As a geologist specializing in glacial systems, Sarah had extensive experience with Arctic weather patterns. If she was concerned about the storm, conditions were probably worse than meteorological reports indicated. Chief Thompson was completing final aircraft checks when Colonel Martinez approached the flight line. Vasquez, I've been monitoring radio traffic from Echo Station. The situation is deteriorating rapidly, and now you're dealing with 5 casualties instead of 4. Elena secured her flight helmet and began final equipment checks. Sir, the mission parameters have changed, but the fundamental requirement remains the same. Those people need extraction, and I'm the only pilot available with the qualifications to attempt it. Martinez studied the weather conditions, noting how visibility was decreasing as snow fell with increasing intensity. Elena, you understand that if you become trapped at Echo Station by weather, we can't mount a second rescue mission. You'll be stuck there until the storm passes, potentially for days. Elena had considered that possibility. If weather closed in while she was on the ground at Echo Station, she would be stranded with 5 casualties, limited medical supplies, and a facility that had been partially destroyed by an avalanche. Survival would depend on her ability to provide medical care with improvised resources while waiting for the storm to pass. So if I don't attempt extraction now, those casualties won't survive long enough for weather conditions to improve. Sometimes the choice isn't between safe options and dangerous options. Sometimes the choice is between action and accepting preventable deaths. Martinez nodded slowly, recognizing the ethical framework that drove Elena's decision. Then God help you, pilot. Bring them home. Elena climbed into the helicopter's cockpit for the first time in 18 months, and the familiar sensation of settling into the pilot's seat brought back memories she'd tried to suppress. The instrument panel layout, the feeling of collective and cyclic controls, the subtle vibrations that indicated aircraft systems functioning normally. Everything felt simultaneously foreign and intimately familiar. She began the engine start sequence, watching gauges come alive as the helicopter's systems activated. The aircraft responded with the steady reliability of a machine that had been properly maintained despite its age. Engine temperatures normal, hydraulic pressure within parameters, navigation systems online though limited by older technology. The radio crackled with Chief Thompson's voice. Kodiak Base to Medical 1, you are cleared for immediate departure. Current weather at destination is marginal VFR with deteriorating conditions. Be advised, you have approximately 28 minutes before weather becomes prohibitive for return flight. Elena acknowledged the clearance while reviewing her flight plan one final time. The route to Echo Station crossed terrain that challenged even experienced mountain pilots under ideal conditions. In deteriorating weather, with outdated navigation equipment and minimal fuel reserves, the flight would test every skill she'd acquired during her aviation career. But as she increased engine power and felt the helicopter lift off from FOB Kodiak's flight line, Elena experienced something she hadn't felt since the Syria crash: complete confidence in her abilities as a pilot. The doubt and guilt that had driven her away from aviation were still present, but they were overwhelmed by clarity of purpose and the knowledge that 5 people's lives depended on her skills. The helicopter climbed into the storm, and Elena began the most challenging flight of her career. Behind her lay the safety of FOB Kodiak and colleagues who now understood that she was far more than just another medic. Ahead lay Echo Station, where Sarah and 4 other casualties waited for rescue that might not arrive in time. Elena had spent 18 months trying to save lives with medical skills alone. Now she would discover whether combining those medical skills with her aviation abilities could accomplish what conventional rescue operations couldn't attempt. The Alaskan wilderness spread beneath her like a frozen wasteland, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Somewhere in that vastness, Sarah Reeves was trapped under debris, trusting that her old friend would find a way to extract everyone, despite impossible odds. Elena adjusted her flight path to compensate for increasing headwinds and began the journey that would either validate her decision to return to the cockpit or prove that some risks were too great to accept, regardless of the potential rewards. For the first time since Syria, she was flying a medical mission where success or failure rested entirely on her abilities as both pilot and medic. The duality that had seemed like a burden was now her greatest asset, and 5 lives hung in the balance as she disappeared into the storm. The helicopter bucked violently as Elena encountered the first major turbulence of the flight, invisible air currents slamming into the aircraft with enough force to test the limits of her restraint system. Outside the cockpit windows, the world had dissolved into a swirling gray void where snow and cloud merged into an impenetrable wall that made visual navigation impossible. Elena's eyes moved constantly between her instrument panel and the terrain-following radar, using technology to see what her eyes could not. 15 minutes into the flight, she was already burning fuel faster than calculated due to headwinds that gusted unpredictably between 40 and 70 knots. The helicopter's older engine worked harder to maintain airspeed, consuming precious aviation fuel with each minute of flight time. Elena recalculated her fuel margins and discovered what she'd feared. Her reserve fuel was disappearing rapidly, leaving her with perhaps 8 minutes of safety margin for the return flight. The radio crackled with Morrison's increasingly desperate voice. "Kodiak Medical, David's pulse is barely detectable now. His breathing is shallow and irregular. I think we're losing him." Elena keyed her microphone while maintaining control inputs to keep the helicopter stable in the turbulence. "Jenny, continue monitoring his airway and keep him as warm as possible. I'm 12 minutes out from your position." 12 minutes, that might be too long for David's deteriorating condition, but there was nothing Elena could do to increase her airspeed without risking structural damage to the aircraft. The helicopter was already operating at maximum safe velocity for the weather conditions, and pushing harder would compromise her ability to control the aircraft during the approach to Echo Station. Elena's navigation system indicated she was approaching the mountain valley where Research Station Echo was located, but visibility remained near zero. She would need to descend through cloud cover and snow, while navigating between mountain peaks that could appear suddenly through the storm. The approach required precise altitude control and constant awareness of terrain elevation, with no margin for navigation errors. She began her descent gradually, watching her radar altimeter and comparing readings to topographical charts that showed the valley's configuration before the avalanche. The landing zone would be different now, possibly significantly altered by the tons of snow and debris that had cascaded down the mountainside. Elena would need to assess the new terrain configuration while simultaneously dealing with weather conditions that were deteriorating beyond forecast predictions. At 800 feet above ground level, Elena caught her first glimpse of Echo Station through a brief break in the clouds. The research facility looked like it had been struck by a giant fist, one building completely buried under avalanche debris, another partially collapsed, and scientific equipment scattered across what had been a carefully organized base camp. The landing zone she'd planned to use was covered with snow and debris that would make touchdown impossible. Elena circled the facility once, burning precious fuel while searching for an alternative landing area. The avalanche had created new terrain features that weren't shown on any chart, and she needed a flat area large enough for the helicopter's rotor disc, while remaining close enough to the casualties for rapid evacuation. Finally, she identified a possibility: a section of the original helicopter pad that appeared to be clear of major debris, though covered with several feet of fresh snow. The approach to this improvised landing zone required flying between two large boulders that had been deposited by the avalanche, with less than 20 feet of clearance on either side of the helicopter's rotor blades. Elena had performed similar precision approaches in combat zones, but never in weather conditions that made depth perception nearly impossible. She began her final approach, using every instrument available to judge distance and altitude, while the helicopter fought crosswinds that tried to push her into the surrounding obstacles. At 50 feet above the ground, a sudden downdraft grabbed the aircraft and slammed it toward the snow-covered landing zone faster than Elena had intended. She applied power and pulled back on the cyclic control, arresting the descent, just as the helicopter's skids touched down in snow that was deeper than her radar altimeter had indicated. Yeah, the aircraft settled with a jarring impact that sent snow flying in all directions, but Elena felt the solid contact that indicated successful touchdown. She completed her engine shutdown checklist while scanning the area for signs of the casualties she'd come to evacuate. Through the blowing snow, she could see figures emerging from one of the partially intact buildings, moving with the desperate urgency of people who had been waiting for rescue that might not have arrived. Elena grabbed her medical kit and emergency equipment, then opened the cockpit door to face weather conditions that hit her like a physical assault. The wind drove snow into her face with enough force to make breathing difficult, and the temperature was at least 20 degrees below zero. She could survive in these conditions for the time required to load casualties, but prolonged exposure would quickly lead to hypothermia and reduced manual dexterity. Jenny Morrison reached the helicopter first, shouting over the wind noise to be heard, "Elena, thank God you made it!" "David collapsed 5 minutes ago. I can't find a pulse anymore." Elena followed Morrison toward the damaged buildings, noting how the young woman moved with the exhausted determination of someone who had been fighting to keep people alive with inadequate resources. As they reached the shelter where casualties were being treated, Elena got her first direct assessment of the medical challenges awaiting her. David Chen, the internal bleeding casualty, was unconscious on an improvised stretcher made from sleeping bags and research equipment. His skin had the gray pallor that indicated severe blood loss and shock, and Elena could barely detect a pulse when she checked his carotid artery. Without immediate surgical intervention, he would die within minutes rather than hours. The other casualties were in various stages of trauma and hypothermia. Dr. Martinez, again no relation to the colonel, had sustained multiple lacerations and a probable concussion, but remained conscious and responsive. Graduate student Kevin Park had suffered a fractured arm and possible internal injuries, but was stable for the moment. Research assistant Lisa Wong showed signs of hypothermia and shock, but no apparent major trauma. And then there was Sarah. Elena found her trapped under a section of steel shelving that had collapsed during the avalanche, pinning her legs beneath equipment that probably weighed several hundred pounds. Sarah's face was pale with pain and cold, but her eyes were alert and tracked Elena's movements with the focused attention of someone fighting to remain conscious. "Elena, you made it." Sarah's voice was weaker than during their radio conversation, but she managed to smile. "I was starting to worry you'd gotten lost in this weather." Elena knelt beside her friend, conducting a rapid medical assessment while evaluating the debris situation. Sarah's legs were trapped, but she could move her toes and reported feeling in both feet, suggesting that spinal cord damage was unlikely. However, the prolonged compression and cold exposure were causing circulation problems that could lead to permanent injury if not resolved quickly. "Sarah, I need to get this weight off your legs. Can you tell me about numbness or tingling?" Sarah grimaced as she tried to shift position. "Some numbness in my left foot, but I can still feel everything." "Elena, check David first. I can wait a few more minutes, but he can't." Elena looked between her trapped friend and the unconscious man whose pulse was fading rapidly. Standard medical triage protocols called for treating the most critical patient first, which clearly meant focusing on David's life-threatening condition. But Sarah's situation was also deteriorating. Prolonged compression could cause muscle death and kidney failure, even if her injuries weren't immediately fatal. The radio in Elena's medical kit crackled with Chief Thompson's voice. "Medical 1, be advised weather conditions are deteriorating ahead of schedule. You have approximately 15 minutes before return flight becomes impossible due to wind speeds. 15 minutes to treat 5 casualties, load them safely for transport, and begin takeoff procedures." Elena felt the weight of impossible mathematics settling over her decision-making process. Even with perfect efficiency, she needed at least 20 minutes to provide adequate medical care and complete evacuation procedures. Elena made the decision that would define the entire mission. "Jenny, I need you to help me move this debris off Dr. Reeves. We're going to work together on multiple casualties simultaneously." Morrison looked confused. "But David needs immediate attention. Shouldn't we focus on the most critical patient first?" Elena was already positioning herself to lift the steel shelving. "Jenny, David needs surgical intervention that I can't provide here. I can keep him alive during transport, but first we need mobility for all casualties. Help me lift." Together, Elena and Morrison managed to shift the debris enough for Sarah to extract her legs from underneath. Sarah's relief was immediate and visible, though she winced as circulation returned to compressed tissues. Elena conducted a rapid assessment and determined that Sarah had severe bruising and possible stress fractures, but no injuries that would prevent transport. Elena moved quickly to David's position, checking his vital signs and finding what she'd feared. His pulse was barely detectable, and his breathing was becoming increasingly irregular. Without immediate medical intervention, he would die regardless of evacuation attempts. But Elena had equipment and medications that could stabilize him long enough for transport. She established an intravenous line and began administering fluids and medications designed to support blood pressure and cardiac function. David's response was minimal but measurable. His pulse strengthened slightly, and his breathing became more regular. The interventions wouldn't save his life, but they might keep him alive long enough to reach definitive medical care. The radio crackled again with increasingly urgent weather updates. "Medical 1, wind speeds now gusting to 75 knots. You have 10 minutes maximum before takeoff becomes impossible." Elena looked around at 5 casualties in various stages of medical stability, none of whom could walk to the helicopter without assistance. Loading them all would require multiple trips across terrain made treacherous by snow and debris, consuming precious minutes while weather conditions deteriorated beyond safe flight parameters. She made another decision that violated standard medical evacuation protocols. Everyone who can move under their own power needs to start walking to the helicopter now. Ginny, you help Dr. Martinez and Kevin. I'll carry David and help Sarah. Morrison looked uncertain. Elena, should we really be moving trauma patients without proper immobilization? Elena was already preparing David for transport, using sleeping bags and research equipment to create an improvised stretcher. Jenny, staying here means dying here. Sometimes, the choice isn't between safe options and dangerous options. Sometimes, the choice is between movement and death. She lifted David's improvised stretcher, noting how his weight strained her muscles that had been conditioned for medical duties rather than heavy lifting. But military training had prepared her for exactly this situation, carrying wounded personnel across difficult terrain while maintaining medical care and situational awareness. Sarah struggled to her feet with Elena's assistance, testing her injured legs and determining that she could walk with support. Elena, I can make it to the helicopter if someone helps me balance. Elena assigned Kevin Park to assist Sarah while she carried David across the debris-scattered terrain between the damaged buildings and her improvised landing zone. The journey took longer than she'd calculated due to the difficult footing and David's deteriorating condition, but finally all 5 casualties were positioned near the helicopter. Loading them into the aircraft required careful weight distribution calculations and medical priority positioning. Elena placed David in the position with best access to medical monitoring equipment, where she could observe his condition during flight. Sarah and the other casualties were secured in positions that balanced aircraft weight, while allowing Elena to provide medical care if needed. As Elena completed her pre-flight checklist, the radio delivered the message she'd been dreading. Medical 1. Current wind speeds exceed safe flight parameters. Recommend you shelter in place until conditions improve. Elena looked at David's deteriorating vital signs, then at the weather conditions that were rapidly becoming impossible for flight operations. She had reached the point where following safety protocols meant accepting preventable deaths, while attempting flight meant risking everyone's lives on her ability to control the aircraft in conditions beyond normal operational limits. She made the decision that would either save 5 lives or kill 6 people, including herself. Base. Medical 1 is departing immediately with 5 casualties aboard. Estimated flight time 25 minutes. Elena increased engine power and felt the helicopter lift off from Echo Station's improvised landing zone. Behind her lay the damaged research facility, where she'd just completed one of the most challenging medical evacuations of her career. Ahead lay a flight through weather conditions that would test every skill she'd acquired as both pilot and medic. David's pulse continued to weaken despite her medical interventions, while Sarah fought to remain conscious as her compressed leg injuries caused increasing pain. The other casualties showed various stages of hypothermia and trauma, all requiring medical attention that Elena couldn't provide, while simultaneously fighting to control the aircraft. For the next 25 minutes, she would be the only thing standing between 5 people and death in the Alaskan wilderness. The helicopter shuddered violently as Elena encountered a downdraft that dropped the aircraft 200 feet in seconds, causing David's intravenous line to pull loose and sending medical equipment sliding across the cabin floor. Elena corrected with collective input while reaching back with one hand to check David's pulse, finding it weaker than when they'd departed Echo Station. The combination of blood loss, hypothermia, and the stress of turbulent flight was overwhelming his body's ability to compensate. Sarah, I need you to re-establish David's IV line, Elena called over the engine noise and wind buffeting the aircraft. The supplies are in the medical kit beside your position. Sarah struggled to unfasten her restraints with hands that were stiff from cold and injury. Elena, I can barely feel my fingers. Are you sure I should be doing medical procedures in my condition? Elena fought another gust of wind that tried to push the helicopter toward a mountain ridge barely visible through the storm. "Sarah, you have more steady hands than anyone else back there, and I can't let go of the controls long enough to establish the line myself." Through her peripheral vision, Elena watched Sarah work to insert the IV needle, her movements deliberate but shaky from the combination of cold and her leg injuries. After 2 attempts, Sarah successfully established the line and began administering the fluid replacement therapy that might keep David alive long enough to reach definitive medical care. The navigation system indicated they were halfway to FOB Kodiak, but Elena's fuel consumption calculations revealed a growing problem. The headwinds were stronger than forecast, and the helicopter's older engine was working harder than optimal to maintain airspeed through the turbulent conditions. Her fuel reserves were now critically low, with perhaps 5 minutes of safety margin remaining. Elena keyed her radio to contact base operations. "Kodiak Base, Medical 1 is 15 minutes out with 5 casualties aboard. Be advised, fuel state is critical and weather conditions are beyond normal operational limits." Chief Thompson's voice came back immediately, tension evident, even through the static. "Medical 1. Current conditions at Kodiak show winds gusting to 80 knots with visibility less than 1/4 mile. Landing is going to be extremely challenging." Elena absorbed this information while maintaining control of the aircraft through another series of violent wind gusts. Landing in those conditions would require precision flying beyond anything she'd attempted during her previous career, especially with an aircraft loaded beyond normal weight limits and fuel reserves that left no room for multiple approach attempts. Kevin Park, the graduate student with the fractured arm, was showing signs of shock despite Elena's initial medical interventions. His skin was becoming increasingly pale, and his breathing was rapid and shallow. Elena realized she was looking at multiple casualties who might not survive the remaining flight time, regardless of her piloting abilities. She made a decision that went against every aviation safety protocol she'd ever learned. "Sarah, I need you to take over medical care for all casualties while I focus entirely on flying. Can you handle monitoring everyone's condition?" Sarah looked at the other casualties, then at Elena's intense concentration on the flight controls. "Elena, I'm a geologist, not a medical professional. What if I make the wrong decisions?" Elena adjusted power settings to compensate for another wind gust while explaining medical priorities over her shoulder. "Sarah, you understand scientific observation and logical decision-making. David gets priority. Monitor his pulse and breathing. Call out any changes immediately. Kevin is showing shock symptoms. Keep him warm and watch for deteriorating consciousness. Dr. Martinez and Lisa appear stable but need monitoring for head injury symptoms." The radio crackled with another transmission from base. "Medical 1. Be advised we have emergency medical teams standing by, but the helicopter landing pad may not be safe for approach in current wind conditions. You may need to consider alternative landing sites." Elena processed this information while her mind raced through options. Alternative landing sites meant longer ground transport time for critical casualties, but attempting to land on the designated helicopter pad in 80-knot winds could result in losing control of the aircraft during the approach. She would need to make that decision when she could actually see the landing area, assuming visibility improved enough for visual approach. David's condition was deteriorating rapidly despite Sarah's careful monitoring. His pulse was becoming increasingly irregular, and his breathing was so shallow that Sarah had to place her ear near his mouth to confirm air movement. Elena realized that even if she executed a perfect landing, David might not survive the time required to transfer him to the medical facility. Elena made another decision that reflected her unique combination of aviation and medical training. "Sarah, I'm going to attempt a direct approach to the hospital landing pad instead of the main helicopter landing zone. It's more dangerous in these wind conditions, but it cuts 5 minutes off the ground transport time." Sarah looked out the small cabin windows at weather conditions that appeared impossible for flight operations. "Elena, are you sure this aircraft can handle an approach in winds this strong?" Elena was calculating approach angles and wind correction factors while monitoring engine parameters that were approaching critical limits. "Sarah, This helicopter has been landing in challenging conditions for 15 years. The question isn't whether the aircraft can handle it. The question is whether I can control it precisely enough to put us down safely. The GPS navigation system indicated they were 10 minutes from FOB Kodiak, but Elena could already see the glow of base lighting through the storm ahead. The facility's emergency beacon was functioning, providing a navigation reference that would help her locate the landing area even in near-zero visibility conditions. Elena began her approach descent gradually, watching her altitude and airspeed while fighting wind conditions that seemed determined to prevent her from reaching the base. The helicopter bucked and shuddered through turbulence that made precise control inputs nearly impossible, but Elena compensated with constant corrections that kept them on course toward the medical facility. At 500 feet above ground level, Elena caught her first glimpse of FOB Kodiak through a brief break in the clouds. The base looked like an island of light in an ocean of darkness and storm, with emergency vehicles positioned around the landing areas and personnel waiting despite weather conditions that made outdoor activity dangerous. Elena could see Chief Thompson and Colonel Martinez near the hospital landing pad, along with medical teams prepared for immediate casualty evacuation. The sight of people ready to take over medical care for her patients provided a surge of motivation that helped Elena focus entirely on the challenging approach ahead. The final approach to the hospital landing pad required flying between two buildings while compensating for wind gusts that varied unpredictably in both direction and intensity. Elena had performed similar approaches in combat zones, but never with casualties aboard whose lives depended on her ability to execute a perfect landing on the first attempt. At 100 feet above the landing pad, a sudden crosswind gust pushed the helicopter sideways toward one of the buildings. Elena corrected with aggressive control inputs that bordered on the aircraft's operational limits, feeling the helicopter respond sluggishly due to the additional weight of 5 casualties and their medical equipment. Sarah called out from the cabin, "Elena, David's pulse is barely detectable now. I don't think he's going to make it much longer." Elena increased her descent rate slightly, accepting additional risk to reduce the time between landing and medical facility access. At 50 feet above the ground, she could see medical personnel preparing to receive casualties, their movements coordinated despite weather conditions that made communication difficult. The landing pad appeared and disappeared through blowing snow as Elena descended through the final approach phase. She was flying primarily by instruments now, using altitude and heading references to judge her position relative to the landing area, while wind gusts continued to affect aircraft control. At 20 feet above the ground, Elena encountered severe turbulence caused by wind interacting with the surrounding buildings. The helicopter was thrown sideways and downward simultaneously, requiring maximum control input to prevent a crash landing that would kill everyone aboard. Elena pulled power and applied cyclic correction, fighting to arrest the uncontrolled descent while maintaining enough forward speed to reach the landing pad. The aircraft responded slowly but positively, and Elena felt the main rotor blades bite into the turbulent air to provide lift that stopped their downward trajectory. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad with a jarring impact that sent snow flying in all directions, but Elena felt the solid contact that indicated successful landing. She completed her engine shutdown checklist while medical teams rushed toward the aircraft, prepared to take over casualty care from someone who had served as both pilot and medic for the past hour. Dr. Chen reached the helicopter first, immediately moving to assess David's condition while Elena secured the flight controls. "Elena, outstanding work getting them back here. What's the status on the critical casualty?" Elena climbed out of the cockpit, her legs shaky from the combination of physical stress and adrenaline that had sustained her through the flight. "Doctor, David has internal bleeding with severe blood loss and shock. He's been unconscious for the past 20 minutes with deteriorating vital signs. He needs immediate surgical intervention." Medical teams worked efficiently to transfer all 5 casualties from the helicopter to the medical facility, their movements coordinated despite weather conditions that continued to worsen. Elena watched Sarah being loaded onto a stretcher, noting her friend's exhausted but determined expression as she was carried toward proper medical care. Chief Thompson appeared beside Elena as the last casualty was transferred to the medical facility. "Ma'am, that was some of the most impressive flying I've witnessed in 20 years of aviation operations. How did you manage to control the aircraft in those wind conditions?" Elena was securing medical equipment and conducting post-flight procedures while her mind processed what she'd just accomplished. "Chief, sometimes you have to fly beyond normal limitations when people's lives depend on it. The aircraft performed exactly as designed. I just had to trust the machine and focus on precise control inputs." Colonel Martinez approached carrying weather data that showed conditions continuing to deteriorate beyond what Elena had encountered during her flight. "Vasquez, if you had delayed departure from Echo Station by even 10 minutes, weather conditions would have made return flight impossible. How did you know you had just enough time?" Elena considered the question while reviewing her fuel consumption data and flight performance records. "Sir, sometimes military operations require accepting calculated risks based on experience and situational assessment. I knew the weather window was closing, but I also knew that those casualties wouldn't survive extended exposure without evacuation." Dr. Chen emerged from the medical facility with updates on casualty conditions. "Elena, 4 of the 5 casualties are stable and expected to make full recoveries. David is in surgery now. It's going to be close, but the surgical team believes he has a good chance of survival because you got him here when you did." Elena felt exhaustion settling over her as the adrenaline from the flight began to fade. For the past 90 minutes, she had been simultaneously managing aircraft control in extreme weather conditions and providing medical care for 5 casualties whose lives depended on her abilities in both areas. Yushins, Hayes. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Chief Thompson was completing his assessment of the helicopter, checking for any damage caused by the challenging flight conditions. "Ma'am, the aircraft shows normal wear for severe weather operations, but no significant damage. You brought her back in excellent condition considering what you put her through." Elena appreciated the assessment, though she was more concerned about the human cost of the mission than the mechanical impact on the aircraft. 5 people had been extracted from conditions that would have killed them within hours, but the success had required pushing both equipment and personnel beyond normal operational limits. As medical teams continued treating casualties and base personnel secured equipment against the worsening storm, Elena realized that she had accomplished something unprecedented in her military career. She had successfully combined her aviation skills with her medical training to execute a mission that neither specialty could have completed alone. For the first time since the Syria crash, Elena felt completely confident in her abilities as both pilot and medic. The guilt and doubt that had driven her away from aviation were still present, but they were overwhelmed by the knowledge that her unique combination of skills had saved 5 lives that would otherwise have been lost. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside FOB Kodiak's medical facility, 5 people were alive because someone who was supposedly just a medic had proven capable of extraordinary things when circumstances demanded nothing less than perfection. Elena sat in the medical facility's break room 3 hours after landing, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since grown cold while she watched through the window as maintenance crews struggled to secure aircraft and equipment against winds that now exceeded 90 knots. The storm had intensified beyond all predictions, turning FOB Kodiak into an isolated outpost where nothing moved except blowing snow and emergency personnel conducting critical operations. Dr. Chen entered carrying patient status reports and wearing the exhausted expression of someone who'd spent hours in surgery fighting to save David's life. "Elena, I wanted to update you personally. David made it through surgery. Barely. Another 15 minutes of flight time and we would have lost him. The surgical team removed 3 liters of internal bleeding and repaired damage to his spleen and liver." Elena felt a wave of relief that surprised her with its intensity. During the flight, David had been a medical case requiring her professional attention. Now, learning that he would survive made the mission feel complete in a way that successful aircraft operations couldn't accomplish alone. "What about the other casualties, Doctor?" Dr. Chen consulted her medical charts. Sarah has stress fractures in both legs but no permanent damage. She'll be on crutches for 6 weeks but expects full recovery. Dr. Martinez has a concussion that's responding well to treatment. Kevin Park required surgery for internal injuries we didn't detect initially, but he's stable now. Lisa Wong had severe hypothermia, but she's warming up normally. Elena absorbed this information while processing the realization that all 5 casualties would survive because of decisions she'd made during the most challenging 90 minutes of her military career. The combination of aviation skills and medical training that she'd tried to keep separate had proven essential for mission success. The break room door opened to admit Colonel Martinez, Chief Thompson, and a man Elena didn't recognize, someone in civilian clothes who carried himself with the alert posture that suggested intelligence or special operations background. Their expressions indicated this wasn't a routine debriefing session. "Vasquez, I'd like you to meet Agent Harrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency," Martinez said, gesturing toward the civilian. "He's been monitoring communications related to your rescue mission, and he has some information you need to hear." Agent Harrison settled into a chair across from Elena, opening a tablet loaded with what appeared to be intelligence reports and communication intercepts. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, your rescue mission this morning has attracted attention beyond FOB Kodiak. Word of your success has reached military commands throughout Alaska and beyond." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "What kind of attention, sir?" Harrison activated his tablet display, showing communication intercepts and operational reports from multiple military installations. "Your combination of advanced piloting skills and medical expertise represents a unique capability that several commands have been seeking for specialized operations. The Pentagon has been developing requirements for personnel who can conduct medical evacuations in conditions beyond normal operational parameters." Chief Thompson leaned forward with interest. "Agent Harrison, are you saying that Elena's mission profile matches specific operational requirements?" Harrison nodded. "Chief, there are currently 17 military installations throughout Alaska, northern Canada, and Greenland that have identified potential scenarios requiring personnel with exactly Staff Sergeant Vasquez's combination of skills. Remote locations, extreme weather conditions, and casualties requiring immediate medical attention during flight operations." Elena processed this information with growing concern. "Agent Harrison, are you suggesting that my rescue mission today was some kind of audition for specialized assignments?" Harrison's expression remained neutral. "Staff Sergeant, I'm suggesting that your successful completion of a mission that no one else was willing to attempt has identified you as a resource for operations that conventional medical or aviation personnel cannot execute." Colonel Martinez was reviewing documents on Harrison's tablet with the focused attention of someone recognizing implications for his command structure. "Agent Harrison, what specific types of operations are we discussing?" Harrison activated a different screen showing operational scenarios and mission requirements. "Colonel, consider Research Station Echo multiplied by geographic scope and operational complexity. There are scientific installations, military outposts, and civilian communities throughout the Arctic region that could face similar emergency situations requiring immediate response capabilities." Elena studied the information displayed on Harrison's tablet, noting locations throughout Alaska and northern territories that were even more isolated than Research Station Echo. Military outposts monitoring Russian activities, scientific stations studying climate change, civilian communities dependent on air transport for basic survival needs. "Agent Harrison, these locations are hundreds of miles from conventional medical facilities, accessible only by aircraft, and subject to weather conditions that ground normal flight operations for weeks at a time," Elena observed. Harrison's expression indicated approval of her tactical assessment. "Exactly. Personnel stationed at these locations accept extreme isolation as part of their duties, but emergency medical situations require response capabilities that don't currently exist." Dr. Chen was studying the medical aspects of Harrison's operational scenarios. "Agent Harrison, you're describing medical evacuation requirements that exceed anything we normally attempt. These missions would require flight medics capable of providing advanced life support, while simultaneously piloting aircraft in conditions beyond standard operational limits. Elena felt pieces clicking together in her mind as she understood the larger implications of her morning rescue mission. "You're saying that my success at Echo Station demonstrates capabilities that could be applied to similar situations throughout the Arctic region." Harrison nodded. "Staff Sergeant, there are currently no other military personnel with your combination of advanced helicopter piloting qualifications and trauma medical expertise. Your successful mission today proves that such combinations are not only possible, but essential for certain types of operations." Chief Thompson was making notes on his own tablet, clearly processing the aviation aspects of Harrison's briefing. "Agent Harrison, executing missions like this regularly would require specialized aircraft, advanced weather detection equipment, and support infrastructure that doesn't currently exist at most locations." Harrison activated another screen showing aircraft specifications and operational requirements. "Chief, the Defense Department has been developing modified medical evacuation helicopters, specifically designed for extreme weather operations. Advanced navigation systems, enhanced engine performance for high-altitude operations, and medical equipment integrated for single-operator use." Elena studied the aircraft specifications with professional interest, noting modifications that addressed exactly the limitations she'd encountered during the Echo Station mission. Enhanced fuel capacity, weather radar systems, and medical monitoring equipment positioned for pilot access during flight operations. But she also recognized something that Harrison hadn't explicitly stated. "Agent Harrison, you're describing aircraft and operational requirements that assume single-operator missions. These aren't conventional medical evacuations with dedicated pilot and medical crew." Harrison's expression confirmed her analysis. "Staff Sergeant, the locations and conditions we're discussing often make multi-person crew operations impossible. Weather windows may last only minutes, landing zones may accommodate only minimal personnel, and some scenarios require immediate response without time for conventional crew coordination." Colonel Martinez was studying operational timelines and geographic requirements. Agent Harrison, implementing this operational concept would essentially create a new military occupational specialty. Personnel would need continuous training in both aviation and medical procedures, plus specialized equipment and support infrastructure. Elena felt the weight of Harrison's briefing settling over her future career plans. "Agent Harrison, are you offering me assignment to this specialized program? Or are you telling me that I'm being assigned regardless of my preferences?" Harrison closed his tablet and met Elena's eyes directly. "Staff Sergeant, your performance today demonstrates that you already possess the skills for operations that no one else can execute. The question is whether you're willing to develop those capabilities further or whether you prefer to return to conventional medical duties." Elena thought about the past 8 months at FOB Kodiak, treating routine medical cases and conducting standard patient care duties, while keeping her aviation background carefully separated from her medical responsibilities. The rescue mission had forced her to integrate those skills in ways she'd never attempted, and the results had exceeded her expectations. But she also recognized that accepting Harrison's offer would mean abandoning any pretense of being a conventional medical corps member. She would become a specialist in missions that few people could attempt, operating in conditions that tested the limits of both human and mechanical capabilities. Dr. Chen was studying the medical requirements outlined in Harrison's briefing materials. "Lena, these missions would require you to maintain proficiency in both advanced trauma care and precision flying techniques. That's essentially 2 full-time specialties combined into a single operational requirement." Elena had been considering the same challenge. Military aviation required constant training and currency requirements to maintain proficiency, while medical specialization demanded continuous education and practical experience. Combining both fields would require dedication that exceeded normal military career paths. Chief Thompson looked up from his review of the aircraft specifications. "Ma'am, the helicopters described in this program represent significant advances over anything currently available. If you accepted this assignment, you'd be flying aircraft that most pilots only dream about operating." Elena appreciated Thompson's perspective, but she also understood that advanced aircraft came with advanced operational requirements. Better equipment meant more challenging missions, higher expectations, and greater responsibility for outcomes that could affect multiple lives. Agent Harrison was monitoring Elena's reaction to the briefing information with the patience of someone accustomed to recruiting personnel for specialized assignments. "Staff Sergeant, you don't need to make a decision immediately, but I need you to understand that your successful mission today has created opportunities that didn't exist yesterday." Elena stood and walked to the break room window, looking out at weather conditions that would have made her morning rescue mission impossible if attempted now. The storm was a reminder that Arctic operations involved variables beyond human control, requiring personnel who could adapt to changing conditions with minimal support. "Agent Harrison, if I accepted assignment to this program, where would I be stationed?" Harrison activated his tablet again, showing military installations throughout Alaska and Northern Territories. "Staff Sergeant, the program would involve rotation between multiple locations based on operational requirements. You would maintain primary assignment at installations with specialized aircraft and support equipment, but deploy as needed for specific missions." Elena studied the locations Harrison displayed, noting facilities positioned throughout some of the most isolated and challenging environments on Earth. Military outposts monitoring international boundaries, research stations conducting sensitive operations, and civilian communities dependent on military support for emergency services. Colonel Martinez was reviewing personnel records and assignment procedures. "Vasquez, accepting this assignment would represent a significant change in your military career path. You would essentially be creating a new specialty rather than following established promotion tracks." Elena understood Martinez's concern. Military careers progressed through predictable advancement patterns based on established specialties and proven performance metrics. Creating a new operational specialty meant accepting uncertainty about future advancement opportunities and professional development. But Elena also recognized that her morning rescue mission had already changed her military career in ways that couldn't be reversed. Word of her success would spread throughout military commands, and she would never again be seen as just another Medical Corps member performing routine duties. Agent Harrison was preparing to conclude his briefing when the facility's communication system crackled with an emergency transmission. "Phobie Kodiak, this is Thule Air Base, Greenland. We have a medical emergency requiring immediate evacuation assistance. Are there any aircraft available for extreme weather operations?" Elena looked at Harrison, then at Colonel Martinez and Chief Thompson. The request was exactly the type of mission Harrison had been describing: remote location, extreme weather conditions, and medical emergency requiring capabilities beyond conventional operations. Colonel Martinez accepted the radio handset. "Thule Air Base, this is Phobie Kodiak. What is the nature of your medical emergency?" The response came through with static and interference caused by the continuing storm. "FOB Kodiak, we have personnel trapped at a weather monitoring station approximately 200 kilometers north of our location. Avalanche has buried their facility with multiple casualties reported. Current weather conditions exceed all aircraft operational limits." Elena felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her mind as she processed the operational requirements. 200 kilometers across Arctic terrain, weather conditions that grounded conventional aircraft, and casualties requiring immediate medical attention. Agent Harrison was watching Elena's reaction with professional interest. "Staff Sergeant, that mission represents exactly the type of operation we've been discussing. Are you interested in demonstrating your capabilities on a larger scale?" Elena looked out at the storm that showed no signs of diminishing, then at the people who were offering her the chance to transform her military career from conventional medical duties to something unprecedented in military aviation. "Agent Harrison, when do we start?" Agent Harrison activated a secure communication device that connected directly to Pentagon operations centers, his fingers moving across the interface with the practiced efficiency of someone who had coordinated similar specialized missions throughout his career. "This is Harrison, authorization code Delta 7 Alpha. I need immediate activation of Arctic Medical Response Protocol. with Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez designated as primary operator. Elena watched Harrison's communication procedures with growing understanding that accepting his offer meant entering a level of military operations she'd never experienced. The secure channels, specialized authorization codes, and direct Pentagon connectivity indicated resources and support infrastructure far beyond anything available to conventional medical or aviation units. The response came through Harrison's device within minutes, delivered in the clipped tones of someone accustomed to coordinating critical operations. Agent Harrison, Arctic Medical Response Protocol is authorized for immediate activation. Specialized aircraft and support equipment are being deployed to your location via C-130 transport. Estimated arrival time 4 hours. Elena processed the timeline while reviewing what she knew about the Greenland emergency. 4 hours to receive specialized equipment, conduct mission briefing and flight planning, then execute a medical evacuation across some of the most challenging terrain in the Arctic region. The timeline was aggressive, even by military standards, but Elena was beginning to understand that this specialized program operated according to different parameters than conventional operations. Colonel Martinez was monitoring communications while reviewing operational requirements that exceeded anything FOB Kodiak had previously supported. Agent Harrison, deploying specialized aircraft to this location during current weather conditions presents significant logistical challenges. How do you plan to get equipment through weather that's grounding everything else? Harrison consulted his device, accessing transportation data and weather routing information. Colonel, the C-130 carrying specialized equipment is equipped for severe weather operations and will approach from the south, avoiding the worst storm conditions. The cargo includes not just aircraft, but support personnel and equipment specifically designed for this mission profile. Elena felt a mixture of anticipation and concern as she realized the scope of resources being deployed for her first official mission in the specialized program. Agent Harrison, what kind of support personnel are we talking about? Harrison activated his tablet display, showing personnel records and specialization data. Staff Sergeant, you'll be working with Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, Aircraft Systems Specialist, with 15 years' experience maintaining helicopters in extreme weather conditions. Sergeant First Class Robert Kim, Communications and Navigation Specialist trained in Arctic operations. And Captain Jennifer Walsh, Medical Officer with Emergency Surgery qualifications. Elena studied the personnel files, noting qualifications that complemented her own aviation and medical background. These weren't conventional support crew members, but specialists selected specifically for missions requiring exceptional capabilities in challenging conditions. Dr. Chen was reviewing the medical aspects of the incoming team composition. Elena, Captain Walsh's qualifications include trauma surgery and advanced life support procedures that exceed what you can provide alone. Having dedicated medical support while you focus on piloting could significantly improve patient outcomes. Elena appreciated Dr. Chen's analysis, though she also recognized that adding crew members increased mission complexity and resource requirements. The specialized program apparently operated with support infrastructure that made conventional military medical evacuation seem simple by comparison. Chief Thompson was studying aircraft specifications transmitted by Harrison's communication system. Agent Harrison, the helicopter being deployed represents significant advances over anything I've seen in 20 years of military aviation. This is cutting-edge technology designed specifically for extreme weather operations. Harrison nodded. Chief, the aircraft designation is MH-60X Arctic variant, modified with enhanced engine performance for high-altitude operations, advanced weather penetration radar, and medical facilities integrated for in-flight surgical procedures. Staff Sergeant Vasquez will be the first operational pilot certified on this aircraft type. Elena felt a familiar surge of anticipation mixed with professional concern. Learning to operate advanced aircraft while simultaneously executing critical missions represented exactly the kind of challenge that had originally attracted her to military aviation. But she also understood that new technology required extensive training and familiarization that they didn't have time for before the Greenland mission. The communication system crackled with another transmission from Thule Air Base, providing updated information about casualties awaiting evacuation. FOB Kodiak, this is Thule Air Base. We have confirmation of 5 personnel trapped at the weather monitoring station. 2 are reported as critical casualties requiring immediate medical intervention. Weather conditions continue to deteriorate with no improvement forecast for at least 48 hours. Elena absorbed this information while calculating flight requirements and mission parameters. 2 critical casualties meant extended medical care during flight operations, while 48 hours of continuing severe weather eliminated any possibility of delayed evacuation or alternative rescue approaches. Agent Harrison was coordinating with transportation and logistics personnel via his secure communication device. Staff Sergeant, the specialized equipment package includes not just aircraft and personnel, but medical supplies and surgical equipment designed for field operations in extreme conditions. You'll have capabilities that exceed most hospital emergency departments. Elena understood the implications of Harrison's statement. Advanced medical equipment meant increased capability to save lives, but also increased responsibility for making life and death decisions with minimal support from conventional medical facilities. The specialized program required personnel capable of providing definitive medical care rather than just stabilizing patients for transport. Colonel Martinez was reviewing weather data and flight routing options for the Greenland mission. Vasquez, the route to the weather monitoring station crosses approximately 400 kilometers of Arctic terrain, with no alternative landing sites and weather conditions that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. Are you confident about attempting this mission? Elena considered Martinez's question while studying topographical charts and weather forecasts that showed sustained winds exceeding 70 knots, temperatures below -30 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility conditions that would make navigation extremely challenging. The mission represented significant escalation in complexity compared to her morning rescue at Echo Station. Sir, the mission parameters are within my experience range, and the specialized aircraft should provide capabilities that exceed what I had available this morning. The addition of dedicated medical support personnel should improve patient outcomes significantly. Harrison was monitoring Elena's response with professional assessment. Staff Sergeant, this mission will serve as your operational evaluation for the specialized program. Success demonstrates that you're capable of the full range of missions we've been discussing. Any concerns about proceeding? Elena felt the weight of Harrison's evaluation criteria settling over her decision-making process. This wasn't just another rescue mission, but a test that would determine her future military career path and access to specialized capabilities that could save lives throughout the Arctic region. Agent Harrison, I understand the evaluation implications. My primary concern is ensuring that casualties receive optimal medical care, rather than demonstrating my capabilities for program qualification. Harrison's expression indicated approval of Elena's priorities. Staff Sergeant, that perspective is exactly what we're looking for in personnel assigned to this program. Mission success is measured by lives saved, not by impressive flying or complex medical procedures. The facility's communication system activated with a transmission announcing the arrival of specialized equipment and personnel. FOB Kodiak, this is Air Force Transport 779er requesting immediate landing clearance. We have priority cargo and personnel for Arctic medical response operations. Elena looked out the break room window to see a massive C-130 transport aircraft approaching through weather conditions that she'd thought were prohibitive for flight operations. The aircraft's approach was steady and controlled despite wind conditions that were affecting everything else at the base, indicating pilot capabilities and aircraft systems designed specifically for extreme weather operations. Chief Thompson was coordinating with air traffic control while monitoring the C-130's approach procedures. That's some impressive flying in these conditions. Whoever's piloting that transport has serious weather flying experience. Elena watched the transport aircraft execute a perfect landing on FOB Kodiak's main runway, noting techniques that she recognized from her own experience with challenging weather approaches. The precision required for that landing indicated crew qualifications that matched the specialized nature of the equipment they were delivering. Within 30 minutes of the C-130's arrival, Elena found herself standing beside an aircraft that represented everything she'd imagined advanced military helicopters could become. The MH-60X Arctic variant was larger than conventional medical evacuation helicopters, with obvious modifications for severe weather operations and extended range capabilities. Technical Sergeant Santos approached carrying detailed aircraft specifications and maintenance information. "Ma'am, I'm Maria Santos and I'll be maintaining this bird for your operations. She's equipped with systems you won't find on conventional aircraft, but I need to brief you on operational differences before you take her up." Elena appreciated Santos's direct approach, recognizing the voice of an experienced maintenance professional who understood that pilot knowledge of aircraft systems was essential for mission success. "Sergeant Santos, what are the primary differences from conventional MH-60 variants?" Santos activated a tablet displaying detailed system schematics. "Ma'am, engine modifications provide 30% more power at altitude, with enhanced fuel efficiency for extended range operations. Weather radar penetrates conditions that would blind conventional systems. Medical facilities include surgical capability and advanced life support equipment that operates independently of ground-based power." Elena studied the aircraft specifications while processing the implications for mission capabilities. Enhanced power and fuel efficiency meant ability to operate in conditions beyond conventional limits, while advanced medical facilities meant capability to provide definitive care rather than just patient stabilization. Sergeant Kim approached carrying communication and navigation equipment that appeared significantly more advanced than anything Elena had used during her previous aviation career. "Ma'am, I'm Robert Kim, and I'll be handling communications and navigation support for your missions. This equipment provides connectivity and positioning accuracy that works even when conventional systems fail." Elena examined Kim's equipment, noting satellite communication capabilities and navigation systems that appeared designed for operations beyond normal infrastructure support. "Sergeant Kim, what's the operational range for communications and navigation in Arctic conditions?" Kim activated his equipment display, showing coverage maps and system capabilities. "Ma'am, satellite communication provides global connectivity regardless of ground-based infrastructure. Navigation accuracy is maintained through GPS, inertial systems, and backup celestial navigation procedures. You'll have connectivity and positioning data even in conditions that isolate you from all conventional support." Captain Walsh joined the equipment briefing, carrying medical supplies and surgical equipment that exceeded anything Elena had seen in conventional medical evacuation configurations. "Staff Sergeant Vasquez, I'm Jennifer Walsh, and I'll be providing medical support for your missions. This equipment represents the most advanced field medical capabilities currently available." Elena studied Walsh's medical setup, noting surgical instruments, advanced monitoring equipment, and pharmaceutical supplies that appeared designed for definitive medical treatment rather than stabilization for transport. "Captain Walsh, this looks like equipment for performing major surgery rather than conventional medical evacuation procedures." Walsh nodded. "Staff Sergeant, the missions you'll be executing often involve casualties who won't survive transport to conventional medical facilities. This equipment allows us to provide definitive surgical intervention during flight operations, essentially creating a flying operating room." Elena processed the implications of Walsh's explanation while understanding that her role would involve not just piloting advanced aircraft, but serving as platform operator for surgical procedures that could determine whether casualties lived or died. The responsibility exceeded anything she'd experienced during conventional medical or aviation duties. Agent Harrison was coordinating final mission preparations while monitoring weather updates and communications from Thule Air Base. "Staff Sergeant, we have updated casualty information from the weather monitoring station. Injuries include traumatic crush injuries, possible spinal damage, and hypothermia complications. Captain Walsh will handle surgical intervention while you focus on flight operations." Elena felt the familiar pre-mission focus settling over her mind as she processed medical requirements, flight parameters, and weather conditions that would challenge every skill she'd acquired during her military career. But for the first time since accepting Harrison's offer, she felt confident about the mission outcome. The specialized equipment, dedicated support personnel, and advanced aircraft represented resources that exceeded her morning rescue capabilities by orders of magnitude. Instead of attempting everything alone, she would be leading a team specifically designed for missions that conventional operations couldn't execute. Elena looked at Santos, Kim, and Walsh, specialists whose careers had prepared them for exactly this type of operation. Team, we have casualties who won't survive without immediate intervention, weather conditions that challenge conventional flight operations, and mission requirements that exceed standard medical evacuation procedures. Anyone have concerns about proceeding? Santos, Kim, and Walsh exchanged glances, then looked back at Elena with expressions that indicated professional confidence in both the mission and her leadership capabilities. "Ma'am," Santos replied, "we've been training for missions like this for 2 years. We're ready to show what this equipment can accomplish with the right pilot in command." Elena felt something shift inside her that completed the transformation from conventional medical corps member to specialized program operator. She was no longer someone trying to combine separate aviation and medical skills, but team leader for operations that required both specialties integrated at the highest possible level. The weather monitoring station casualties were waiting for rescue that only her team could provide, and Elena was ready to demonstrate that some missions required capabilities beyond conventional military operations. 6 hours later, Elena set the MH-60X down on Thule Air Base's landing pad with 5 rescued casualties aboard, all alive thanks to Captain Walsh's in-flight surgical procedures and the most challenging Arctic flight in modern military history. The weather monitoring station team had been extracted from conditions that would have killed them within hours, with 2 casualties surviving only because Walsh had performed emergency surgery at 8,000 feet while Elena flew through a blizzard that had grounded every other aircraft in the region. As Elena powered down the advanced helicopter, she realized that the quiet medic who'd arrived at FOB Kodiak 8 months earlier no longer existed. In her place stood someone who commanded resources that most military personnel never knew existed, leading a team capable of missions that pushed the boundaries of what human skill and technology could accomplish together. Colonel Martinez was waiting with Elena's new assignment orders when she returned to base operations. "Vasquez, congratulations on your selection as the first operational pilot for the Arctic Medical Response Program. Your next deployment is to Elmendorf Air Base, where you'll be training additional personnel for similar missions throughout the polar regions." Elena accepted the orders while processing how completely her military career had transformed. She joined the medical corps to save lives, never imagining that saving lives would require becoming something unprecedented. A pilot medic capable of operations that no one else would attempt. They'd called her just a medic until she flew the rescue mission no one else would take. Now she was writing the operational manual for missions that didn't exist before her success proved they were possible. What did you think of Elena's incredible transformation? Drop a comment below sharing which moment shocked you most. If you enjoyed this story of courage and hidden talents, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest incredible tales. What other ordinary heroes would you like to hear about? Your suggestions drive our next amazing stories.